Cool. So, Mike, welcome.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you here today. So, Mike, you are, by way of introduction, the CTO for the AA. AA, obviously, big household brand, huge household brand, certainly in the UK. And I think it's a company most people have had some form of interaction with on some way, shape and form on a regular basis. So really interested to hear more about your role today, how you guys approach things from a tech perspective. Before we launch into that, I've got to say, I have been really looking forward to this episode today. From our previous conversation discussing your background, I think it's fair to say you probably haven't had the most well-trodden route throughout your technology career, and not always done things as expected. But I won't ruin your story. I'll let you tell it. So if you'd be so kind, it'd be great just to start at the beginning, get a bit of an understanding of where you started in technology, how you came into the role of a CTO, and venture forth from there.
Sure. So, yeah, I suppose going back to the origins of technology, for me, it's always been a passion. I've loved technology ever since, I suppose, got my hands on a ZX81 for those people who want to go to Wikipedia and go for a history lesson on IT.
I never had one, I must admit. But
yeah, rubber keyboard, very interesting.
Really? Yeah, okay.
But anyway, so I started off very young. For me, it was a hobby, playing football, did a lot of sport in the same kind of aspect of playing sport. I wasn't studious. I think I was intelligent, if that really means something. But, I kind of grew up in a background where it was all about getting out, playing football, playing cricket. And then, came back home, started messing about at WH Smith's, if people remember that. I think it's still going.
It is, yeah.
So, yeah, still around normally in train stations. So didn't have a computer at home. So I used to go after school to WH Smith's and hack about on their computers in the early days. Found it really intriguing, found it really interesting that you could type things into this, machine and it came out with a result. And for me, that was quite satisfying in a weird way because it was very linear. It was like you typed something in, something came out.
Yeah,
it responded to my requirements. And I thought, I quite like this. Very kind of switched on to my brain of being logical. So I started off doing that and then pressurized my father into get me into, I suppose, my first PC, which he got. And then in those days, pre-internet, you get a computing magazine and you start off coding little snippets and just enjoyed it from then. And then I suppose, just the interesting part of the story was I didn't really have a peer group. When I think about my children now and where they grow up and the schools and the influences, they have role models, they have, aspirations to be A, B or C, and they get, a good peer group from their parents, for example. But my parents were, first-time immigrants to the UK. They were working in, factories. They weren't really, I suppose, working in any kind of, intellectual capacity. So, to get your own you had to be a self-starter. And so where I grew up, the common route was you go to school and then you go into trade.
Okay.
But I realized at 16, I thought there's got to be more to life than being born and bred and living in Swindon. Great place as it is. Pretty famous from The Office, if you've ever seen that. But for me, it wasn't really aspirational in some respects. And I thought there's got to be more to life than just working in Swindon and staying here. And then someone said to me at 16, get these things called A-levels. And I thought, is that it? And he went, yeah, just get a couple of A-levels and you can go to university. You can leave Swindon and that's it. And I thought, right. So at 16, I thought, I need to go to college. Wasn't really working so hard at GCSEs. Again, it goes back into not having the right peer group. And I think there's a lot of sliding doors when people look back at opportunity. Sometimes you need to grasp it. Sometimes you're given it. Sometimes you're pushed into it and you don't realize at the time why parents are doing what they're doing. As I tell my kids now, I'm trying to give you opportunities. For me, it was kind of like you had to find your opportunities. So at 16, I really was a little bit clueless, apart from sport, about what life really meant. And then I went to college and I went to apply for college and the guy said, you need 4 GCSEs. I remember, okay, I got 4, I think. I didn't really work that hard. Luckily, I had good maths, I had good English, I had history, and then I had something called typing, which was my 4th GCSE. And I said to the guy, does that count? And he kind of looked it up and he went, you're in. Because that was all you...
I mean, I must admit, that's a new one. I've not heard that one before.
Yeah. So I did my GCSEs. I was born in 73. I turned 50 this year. So GCSEs would have been like 88, 89. Okay. There was no computing. There's no internet, right?
On a typewriter? Or was
on a typewriter.
Wow, fair play.
Right. And so I I did, so there you go. So it was the precursor of computing, I suppose. We had computing, but it wasn't GCSE at that point. Got to the A levels and chose to do computer science, maths, economics, and then kind of had the epiphany probably about 17 that, okay, I quite enjoy this computing thing. I quite like the way it resonates with my brain. I quite enjoy, again, the programming bit. And I thought, right, this is what I want to do. And then I suppose sometimes you need that peer group. And I was playing cricket a lot on the weekends, and there was a guy there who was a developer. He was a contractor. I hadn't heard that term before, but he was making like £20 an hour, right? And I was thinking, wow, for what? And he's like, just coding. And I thought, right, I want to be exactly what you do.
Going to draw upon my typing GCSE, right?
I'm going to draw my typing GCSE. I can type 40 words per minute. There's got to be a career here. And so back in 89 when I applied for university, A levels 91. It wasn't too hard to get into computer science because it was still at the, I suppose, infancy of being a popular degree course. I think now it's probably the number one degree course.
Definitely out there. Yeah.
But back in 91 when I applied, you needed good grades, which I got. And then got to university, and that was it, I suppose. Started off doing computer science, did maths, did economics, still stayed in those subjects. As long as it didn't have to involve writing an essay, I was okay. I realized that, early on, nature, nurture, you know what you're good at, you know what to avoid. So it was computing for me all the way. And then I graduated, and then let's just say it wasn't the most top ranking degree grade. I think University of Life got hold of me more than University of Education got hold of me. But I have no regrets.
Well, absolutely.
I spent 3 glorious years at Cardiff University, and some of my best friends are still the ones who I met on that first day back in 1991.
What a place, scared to uni, eh?
Great place. So long story very short, came out in 94 and then thought, right, now I need to get a job with this degree in computer science. Luckily, it didn't quite matter what grade you had as long as you had computer science, thank God, and got my first job, I suppose.
Fair enough. Good stuff. Well, I love that story. I really do. I mean, it's you strike me like somebody that sort of follows their intuition to a degree, and I think it's always nice to hear the story of where you started, where you weren't necessarily pushed down a particular route, but you realised that something like computer science resonated with the logic side of your brain, and obviously you followed that channel, and now you're a CTO, right? And that's a great story, a really nice.
And it's one I think my message from all of that is, as I have 2 young kids now, is really find a passion for what you do.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be, if you're going to make coffee, just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right. Make it every day, make it to the best of your ability. And when you wake up every Monday, you want to go and do it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's cliched, if you really enjoy what you do, it's not a day's work in some respects. And for me, I suppose it's a little bit, I've been very fortunate in that right time, right place. Did a computer science degree, landed in 94 into a job market that was still trying to understand what IT was all about. But again, I just enjoyed it. There was no plan, right? Whereas now with my kids, I'm trying to give them a plan, and they look at me a little bit like, I'm now putting myself in my daughter's, who's 15, thinking if my father had told me at 15 what to do, I'm sure the way that she looks at me is how I would have looked at him. But he didn't really give me any advice. His one advice was always, look after your health and kind of have a smile and be happy and treat people, very simple basics.
Yeah.
It wasn't about be ambitious. It wasn't about be successful, make money. They didn't really, feature in the vernacular in our conversations.
Okay, interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If for him, it's really about, if you're happy and you're healthy, the rest of the things will come your way.
Yeah.
And so I've had that kind of happy-go-lucky attitude, I suppose, all my life. And then, at certain points, you need to kind of realize it's only going to get you so far. You do need to then think about where you want to go and what you want to do. And some people have that at 10, 15, 25. Some entrepreneurs, I heard some stats, like the entrepreneurs that are making the most success of their life get it late, 40, 45, 50.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I don't think there is a path to what success is. And success is measured by yourself versus what other people think of you. Because if I had taken the measurements of success from my peer group, I failed miserably. Okay. until about 25. But for the first 25 years, compared to where they were and where I was way below the ladder. But for me, there wasn't really, luckily, I suppose the peer pressure there wasn't so great. It was, I was enjoying what I was doing. And then you kind of meet people, whether that's partners or friends or colleagues. And then you start to look across and say, hey, I kind of like what you're doing. How do I get to do that?
Yeah.
Similarly, you look across and say, I can do that. And you give yourself a little bit of confidence. Some people have that confidence instilled and that moves into arrogance. And some people sometimes don't use it fully. And then you're wondering, is that a lost opportunity? So, it's very difficult to say what success looks like.
Yeah, it is, especially in this world that we live in today where, money is sort of prioritized over all else. But I totally agree with you. I mean, I for the first 10 years probably of my recruitment career, chased money because I thought that was the thing that was going to make me happier. You thought, the next promotion, or got to be happy when I get there. And then lo and behold, you get there and you're not, and you get another 20 grand in your paycheck and you're just as miserable, if not more miserable, because you've got more responsibilities to bear. And I totally agree with you. I think as parents, obviously it's something I particularly think about on a daily basis, being in recruitment. My wife's a teacher as well. So between us, is something really we talk about quite often. How do you set your kids up for success, and what are those lessons that you really want to teach them at an early age?
Yeah, and I think it's important. Like I said, I think going back to that, epiphany at 16, or sliding doors. Do I go to college? Do I go into industry? If I go into trade, I probably would have been successful in any of those. I don't think there was a right route. I've met some of the best coders and programmers who I've met never went to university. They came out at 16 and they were coding away, but they had a passion. Yeah. The people who I've met who really enjoy what they do, and the people who've been really successful, and it's not all of them, obviously, because some of them are, I have a lot of friends who work in finance and make a lot of money. They're not really happy. No. But are they successful? Financially, yes. But mentally and from a social perspective, they don't talk about work. They don't enjoy it. For me, I'm thinking it, breathing it, living it on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
I enjoy it. For me, it's just, I'm in the right place, right?
Yeah, fantastic. And it's great, like I said, it's culminated in, I suppose the pinnacle of the tech career, becoming a CTA. So that's something I'm quite keen to pick on a thread, because obviously a lot of engineers, the way the mind works, they really enjoy that kind of reinforcement of solving logical problems. It doesn't always lend itself well to progressing into leadership, people management, maybe those sort of softer skills that you need to be a CTO. So was it always a natural progression for you to move into leadership? Did you always feel you were cut out for it? Is it something you had to work hard on? And I suppose, what were those skills that you personally had to develop to get that well-rounded CTO skill set?
Yeah, I think you always have to work at it. I'm always reading. I'm always learning. I'm always understanding how to be more self-aware, empathy, understanding people, soft skills, hard skills, technical skills, numerical skills. They're not all natural. Technology was, coding was, IT was natural. And then as you start to progress through your career, it's unfortunate, I suppose, as a technologist, you do get to this fork in the road where there's not enough hours in the day to be truly technical. And then start to move into some type of management or leadership role. Yeah. It just doesn't happen, right? So, and I have friends of mine who I started off with at 21 who are still coding. They've been doing it for 30 years. And they're as happy as Larry. And they're like, we're exactly where we want to be. My dread would be managing somebody. Okay. Because they enjoy going in. It's a set problem. They put on their headphones. They write their code. It compiles. They go home. I enjoyed that. Then I got to the point where I thought, that's good, but I feel like a note taker. How do I become less of a note taker and more influence in what I'm building, how I'm building, and the problem statement? And to do that, I needed to move closer to the business, right? I suppose, you know what I mean? I needed to get closer to understanding the business. And I suppose naturally, as I started to become more inquisitive around the other side of being given a set of instructions and started to do some analysis around what the problem statement was, you start to kind of naturally start moving away from just being a coder. And that's what happened to me. Probably about 10 years in, I realized also as a coder, as a developer, the market was changing, right? So we're talking about 2001, 2002 now. The advent of offshore technology was coming in. You know, the Indian software houses were coming in.
Yeah.
Developers were now becoming a commodity. It wasn't such a skill set anymore. It was more of a numbers game. Yeah. And I thought, if I don't change, if I don't adapt, then I've either got to be the best coder, and I was good, but I wasn't the best, or I've got to become a chameleon and start changing my spots and start becoming something a bit more useful to the environment I was in.
Interesting. So it's kind of a quite conscious decision at the same time as maybe wanting a fresh challenge. You kind of noted actually that's sort of a conscious choice I need to make.
Almost consciously, yeah, exactly. Some people do it later, some people do it earlier, some people do it too late, and they realize that they can't move because then they're almost, you know, you're boxed in, right? And it's almost like there is a point in time where if you do want to move from a coder into potentially a solution architect, or even if you think about it, maybe a technical lead or a project manager, there's a certain point in time where it's natural to start moving across. Otherwise, you become almost, you know, boxed as you're a developer.
Yeah.
You know, what do you mean? You know, how do you morph into something different?
Yes.
You know, it's quite different because you get labeled. And when you're a contractor, which I did for quite a few years, you're a gun for hire. They don't want you to think out the box, right? They're like, there's the problem.
Yeah.
Your CV is the exact role I need. Just fix the problem. And you start thinking about how you been, you know, they're like, well, actually, I didn't pay for that. What I paid for was you just code away.
Yeah.
So that's probably the reasons why I went from permanent roles to contract roles to permanent roles. They all kind of served the purpose, which was my kind of interest. Or in some respects, you know, it wasn't about the money. When I was contracting, I was making, you know, it was a good daily rate. It was financially very well. But I took a conscious decision to get out of contracting and go permy and take a lower salary, but the role was more diversified.
Yeah,
because I didn't want to be stuck in a box, and it would have been a very successful box. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it wasn't
so
like
how we define success, but yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. So you know, from a financial perspective, I remember when I left the contract I was there for about 3 years, and I remember the guy I was working for said, "Why?" He goes, "You know, you're making an absolute killing." And I said, "Yeah, it's not about the money. I suppose you can say that once you made the money."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And financially, I was making more than I needed as a contractor. So, you know, everyone knows what their burn rate is.
Yeah.
Okay, without getting into finances, everyone knows, you know, there's a great book by a guy called Daniel Pink that talks about, you know, drive, and he talks about intrinsic and extrinsic value.
Yeah.
You've got to pay somebody enough to get them through the door.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're not worrying about the bills, and they're not worrying about childcare.
Yeah.
And once you've done that, you then have to get them, you know, passionate about the organization and the values and the reason why you're there. To get those both right, it's very difficult. But if you do, you have an employee that is satisfied financially as well as intellectually.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that thing. Yeah, one of the kind of light bulb videos I watched online probably about 10 years ago now was the one about mastery, autonomy, and purpose. I don't know if you saw that, but
and that's that purpose bit. And it's so kind of when you're in your earlier years, you don't really think about purpose. You think about income.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Simple, because the income is a means to an end to go out on a weekend, go on holiday, buy your first property, buy a car. You know, because that's what you're doing, right? If you come from, as I came from, a working class family, you know, we were never poor, but you know, we didn't go on any foreign holidays, right? So as soon as I got some money, that was it. I was going, you know, but then it was finances. And then when I got to a certain point, I realized, well, actually, I know I can always make this certain amount of income. Then it became actually, well, what's the purpose? And that's when I changed roles, trying to find almost not a purpose in some respects, but finding satisfaction in an intellect. Like, am I now solving problems that are intellectually demanding?
Yeah.
Because I'm not worried about the money anymore. That's the baseline. But I took a drop, and people said, why? And I said, well, actually, because I'm now at the bottom rung of a ladder that has more growth. Right? Because I got to the top of the ladder in the last role from a financial perspective and even from an intellectual perspective. And I was still curious. So at that point, I thought, well, actually, it's easier to stay. It's risky to take the move.
Yeah.
But I wasn't thinking about the risk. I was thinking about the upside.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, respect. Absolutely. One step back, two step forwards for the saying. Seems like it's paid off. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I changed, so that's probably the first time I also changed from becoming a developer or a coder or a team leader and moved into consultancy and working for, I suppose, the business. So actually thinking about solutions. So, if you ask the question around path to a CTO, I think, you have to make conscious decisions at some point if you want to make, I don't know whether CTO is the end game, right? And but I think if you want to get into a leadership position, you've got to start adding some more, strings to the bow, apart from just technology, and understanding, consultancy helped me understand more about, bedside manner in a weird way, working with consultancies, sink or swim, ability to think fast, think on your feet, to collaborate, to communicate. Those are all the key things that will change you from just a developer who codes to someone who actually then has value beyond just coding. But for me, having that link and credibility to technology, I still rely on it on a daily basis because they expect that, but then they expect a lot more, right? So that's really, I would say to people who think about, the CTO role, be wary of what you ask for, because it's the job you've been doing previously, plus about 5 different things that if you don't enjoy it, it's going to become a very tough day, right? So it's about, I would kind of, as I look back, there were some conscious moves, not to CTO, I think more to roles where I really felt I had additional skills, and then naturally moved from solution architecture to enterprise architecture to chief architect and then CTO.
Fair enough.
And they're all very similar, but just emphasis on different parts of your first skill set.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's almost like additive. It's almost like if you're doing 100% technology and then you move into a solution architect, 100% of technology now becomes the 80%, but still 100%. You're now doing 20% on top. Right? So you then have to start to prioritize and start thinking quicker. And sometimes, it's a very demanding role.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, 100%. I can empathize with that. I mean, talk me through then, in your capacity at the AA, you've been there a little over a year now.
Yeah.
So whenever you join any new business, especially a big brand like that, and you're joining it at the C-suite, I guess it's always going to be a really interesting way in which you approach that role. So talk us through that sort of first year you've had in the business, how you've approached it, and that sort of journey that you've been on the first year.
Yeah, so it's an interesting organization. It's been around since 1905. It has a huge brand, a lot of credibility. It is an interesting brand because when I joined a year ago, my neighbor, who is fairly senior, late 60s, early 70s, she came out proudly showing me her AA membership book, because she's been a member for 30 years.
Right, okay.
And then vice versa, I have another neighbor who's like young 30s, doesn't have a car, AA what? Just has no idea. Right. So it is an organization that's been around, but it's also had to reinvent itself quite a few times. So when I joined a year ago, they'd been purchased by a private equity company. It's all very public, so it's all out there in public domain. And so, the driver is to really reinvigorate the organization. They were carrying let's say legacy, but there was a lot of opportunity. So from my perspective, I had to do a 100-day plan. It's quite good, actually. I've done them a couple of times, but it's a good way to measure, I suppose, your progress in the first, you can say 100 days, whatever it may be. It doesn't really matter, but there's a period of time where you score yourself as to how you progressed. And as you go through the phases of a new role, everyone does this in a certain respect. And the first thing is to understand the current state, is to understand what you've inherited.
Yeah.
Understand the people who you're working with. Show some empathy to the decisions that have already been made. Right? It's very easy to criticize.
Yeah.
Right? It's very easy not to understand the story and the backstory as the reason why they are where they are.
Yeah.
So, my 100-day plan was all about understanding, listening, learning, not trying to, shoot from the hip. I made that mistake previously where I joined a company. I was not early in my career, but it was my first kind of chief architect role. I came in all guns a-blazing, think I had all the answers to all the problems. And then luckily one of the senior, he was the guy I worked for, the chief right risk officer, came over and said, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And he said,
Wise words.
very wise. And I remember, thinking, no, I want to change development, I want to change the software, I want to change this. And he went, okay. Very seasoned guy, said, okay, all of those things will happen and you'll get there. Yeah. But first, no one knows who you are. So first you got to get some credibility. Yeah. First you got to prove, that you can actually listen. And first you got to prove that actually, you're thinking about the organization and it's not about yourself. And you don't know who the people you're working with, the people you've inherited. So I got around to this role. There's a lot more, let's say, listening, a lot more thinking, a lot more analysis without jumping in with, I've got the solution.
Interesting.
Whereas first of all, I thought I had the solution. Interestingly enough, that role lasted 9 years because it took time. Different organizations have a different pace of change, a different culture. And sometimes the ability to change. Change is the hardest thing, right? As in, you have all the ideas in the world, but you got to take people with you.
Sure.
So when I joined here, it was about understanding the problems, the business drivers, making sure what you're doing has a direct line back to either growth or cost efficiency or optimization. And it's and sometimes it's just hard, right? It's you go to all the best intent in the world, and then your team is maxed. Right, and you look around going, there's no bench strength. Everyone's fully optimized. Yeah. So then, there's only so much you can pick up. So that's a reality check. You got to prioritize. You got to think about what's most important. And it's chipping away. It's very easy to become pessimistic and almost fall into the step of, oh, we've done that before. Yeah. Right. Oh, we've tried that one, Mike. So, you really have to convince heart and mind and take people with you. And I think that's the bit you learn about how to get that done. And sometimes you're not successful because it's just the organization doesn't want to change, or actually what you think is important is not what's important for them. And then you have to sometimes just make a call and go, okay, and it's happened before where I've gone, okay, I think we disagree because I think this is really important. This is where we should be going, but the priorities were elsewhere. And then you kind of need to say, am I actually linked into the purpose? Yeah. Because then it's very difficult to go to work every day, the same old story, and people are going, it's not happening here.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I look back over my career of some of the best CTOs I've ever worked alongside, I think that quality of, like I say, winning hearts and minds and getting people aligned with the greater good of the mission is absolutely key. I think
you can't do it by yourself.
No,
that's the whole thing. You've got to have a vision, and you've got to have the answer in your back pocket, and that comes from experience, not from arrogance. That's because I've been doing it for 30 years. You kind of do know what good looks like. Then you have to convince other people that this is the same journey and you should follow me. But you need them to do the work for you, because if they don't get it and they don't understand the vision and the reason why, then they're not going against you, but it just becomes a harder journey. You can't do it by yourself.
Absolutely.
So you need sponsorship, and I think that's probably important. That word sponsorship, I use it a lot with people, it's a great idea, but who's actually sponsoring the idea? Because if you don't have the sponsorship, then you are it's a bit grassroots, kind of shouting in the wind. You kind of need some sponsorship, someone to kind of clear the landmines, give you air cover. And so I spend a lot of time, I suppose, in some respects, very silent, but you're almost clearing the way for the people who work for you to get stuff done.
Sure.
And as a leader, that's what you can do, is to give them the space and to feel comfortable and to challenge. So when I joined here a year ago, the team was small. They needed to be, I suppose, reinvigorated. They need to have a purpose. I needed to listen because they have the stories. They've got, as I say, bring out your dead. Don't worry about failed projects or technologies that aren't great. Now's not the time to hide it. Let's be transparent. But, that helps, I suppose, then to have a shared vision about where you want to go.
Yeah, fantastic. When you go into a business like the AA, and I guess, like I say, you're kind of in that knowledge absorption mode of getting a lay of the land and trying to actively listen to not only win hearts and minds, but genuinely understand kind of, where, like I say, what is the current state, and obviously from here where we need to go. How do you go about that process of assessing the different competing, potential projects, objectives that may be, and actually prioritizing where is the best place for us to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's some good frameworks out there. I mean, and I think it's a kind of, again, it goes back to experience, but you kind of know there's, risk and regulatory projects that just need to happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I think it's kind of having a balanced portfolio because, you need to fix the stuff that just has to work. So, you get the basics, get the foundations working. Because without that, you're going to have a leaky roof or some bad plumbing. It's like fix the stuff that's kind of hidden a little bit, but it's going to be foundational.
Yeah.
And then start to think about some of the innovation, because you need to kind of, it's very hard to get stuck in the weeds and not deliver anything. But you also need to show a little bit of innovation and kind of bring some outside thinking in. So, prioritization, being really realistic with, people talk about benefits case and business cases, and, you need those. And sometimes you also need a little bit of a hunch, right? And sometimes the business case, and if you're going to do it truly by the business case, one, I don't think anyone ever does business realization after a business case. You do the business case to get the money. They don't ever measure whether the business case met zero. Never seen that happen. But they get you through the front door, right? So there's a little bit of artistic license in business cases, okay, and benefits cases. But you need to do that because it helps you do the thinking. It's like, if you're going to buy a property and it's worth X amount of money, and you go and spend a huge amount of money doing it up, and you sell it, you don't recoup the investment. Maybe you should just put your money in the bank. Maybe that was a better idea. So there's a certain amount of, being harsh with the return you're going to get. And then sometimes there are things you just know you need to do because it's foundational and it will lead to the next project. So having a balanced portfolio, when you look at things like mandatory, things that are just run, keep the lights on, as they say. And then you have additional things which are about growth. Those are the ones that, are exciting to your sponsors because they're the ones that, it's like, they're the ones where, you paint the front door. It looks all nice and exciting, but the door's falling apart behind the scenes. Well, actually, maybe you should have fixed the door first before you paint it, right? So there's a certain amount of trying to keep it all balanced, but you need to do all of it. If you just spend all the money on the foundations...
Not a very nice house.
It doesn't, but it feels good, but no one sees that, right? That's the problem. And from a technology perspective, trying to show that to, I suppose, the business sponsors and the CEOs, the things that excite them is growth, right? New income. Explaining that you fixed a whole bunch of vulnerabilities in some Linux server is not going to excite anybody. But if you don't, you'll end up on the front page of the Times because you've been hacked.
Right? I guess that goes back to the winning hearts and minds piece as well, doesn't it?
So you've got to convince. So you've got to have a balanced portfolio. So you've got to be able to, as I always think about it, I'm not a gambling person, but the best analogy for me is if you think about a roulette table, it's a little bit like betting, but you kind of know if you go for black or red, odds or evens, you're going to get a decent return. So, some of your money just needs to go on the ones that you just know are going to work. Then now and again, you may just go, put it all on 20. We don't do enough of let's just put it all on 20, which for me is like your innovation / slush fund.
Okay.
It's like, there's no business case. It feels like it could be an opportunity. So I need to test and learn quickly. And then someone says, what's the business case? You're like, well, that's the point. I don't have a business case. Because if everyone had a business case, you wouldn't have innovation. Because you'd be too scared to fail.
Yeah.
And that's the point with a lot of organizations is you don't get the opportunity to fail. Or not, in my case, not fail, but learn quickly.
Yeah.
And so, for companies that are truly, I suppose, pushing the envelope, and the startups, for example, they're almost not thinking about the return on investment. They're just thinking about pure innovation, right? If you're a large company that's been around for 100 years, or if you're a FTSE LinkedIn, organization, you have shareholders, you've got to show where the money's being spent. And I think it's in those organizations, innovation is a lot harder.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You know what I mean? But so if you can get that working, and then you need good sponsorship. So that goes back to the point of you can't ask for it from day one. So if you can get some credibility, if you can win hearts and minds, if you can show progress on fixing the core, on the foundations, you then get, the rope gets a little bit longer.
Yeah.
The leash gets a bit longer. They trust you a little bit more. The next phase is then to start showing some innovation and showing how that can feed back into the organization. That takes time.
Yeah.
That's the hard bit. If you can get that working, I think then the role becomes exciting again. Otherwise, it just becomes pretty functional BAU, right? And in my role, that's just as BAU. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But when you're from a technology perspective, technology is an enabler. So how do you get that in front of the board?
Yeah.
Right, without a solid business case.
Right. Well, I guess that's the question I'm going to ask you. How do you do that? Because there's probably so many companies out there, like say FTSE 100 companies, that are in a very similar situation where they've got investors to answer to, and innovation is tough. So how do you go about positioning that to a board to give the start of the leash, like you say?
Yeah. So normally it's like, you've heard the word skunk works, or, sometimes it's, I think, Trojan horse. You kind of have to embed it in other projects that have a business case. The ones where the finance has been approved. There's no harm in putting a little bit additional funding in that particular project to actually start to maybe lay the foundations for the next project. Because sometimes you have to do it, show it before they believe it. Because if you tell them it's an idea, the risk profile is like, it may never pay off. So sometimes you have to get quite inventive with the way you do the funding.
Okay.
Right. And a lot of it is side of the desk, right? Which is unfortunate because it's almost like unrecognized work. You need people who trust you. So, we've done a quite nice few bits of innovation around AI in the AA right now. And it's not above the line work. People don't know about it. But there's a whole bunch of grassroots people who are interested. We've created a local group. There's a whole Teams channel. We're all talking about it. We're all trialing it. Yeah. We're almost like testing it. Because if you put it above the parapet, it becomes a project and a program. It needs funding, it needs steering committee, it needs sponsorship, it needs money, blah, blah, blah.
Constant monitoring.
You're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So if you draw it below the line, it kind of, in some respects, people are working twice as hard because they have a day job. And then you're asking them to, can we just do a little bit of test and learn? Can we set up an environment? Can we test this, test that? There's no project code for that, right? But if people, I suppose, can also share the vision and you get them excited, because as a technologist, this is the stuff they want to do.
Exactly, yeah.
So you have to kind of like give them, I suppose, the opportunity to run. So I'm always sponsoring, the grassroots thinking, because for me, innovation is not big I or small I. It's happening all the time, and it's happening within the business. It's happening with people who, are doing their day job, and they're also thinking about improvement, challenging the status quo, how they can do their job better. That doesn't come within the technology department. I think it's been very naive to think all technology needs to happen with the technology department, and only the IT people can do IT. It's a view that polarizes people. People talk about shadow IT or technology in the business. It happens anyway. So if you think it's not happening, you're not on the same planet as everybody else. It's happening. What you need to do is, how do you embrace it, and how do you put your arms around it without just curtailing it?
Yes.
So what I do is, is the doors open. I encourage people, there's obviously understanding how far you can run, because there are issues with, legalities or contracts or data loss. So you have to be conscious of it.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be stifling innovation. You want that to be happening all over the place. You know what I mean? But what you need to do is ask them to come and show you. So don't force it underground. Yeah. It's like bring it to the surface. And then once you get a groundswell, then you can go back and say, okay, well, actually, this is not me saying this is going to be happening. Look, it's already happened. Now we need to, make it into a project and a program and put some money and more resources behind it. So it is difficult.
Yeah.
It is difficult to do, right?
Yeah.
And when you label something as an innovation program, it's going to fail, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's just, the expectations are almost too high.
Yeah.
So you almost need the people who are really passionate about this in the organization. And that may be somebody who's working in a contact center who sees a bit of opportunity to do complaints management in a different way, or to use, low code or RPA, or in this case, now you have Gen AI coming, you know what I mean? It's becoming just part of the day job.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not about driving it underground. It's about bringing it back out again.
Yeah, interesting.
But kind of showing that, I'm interested and I'm not going to, shut it down.
Yeah.
But there's also a way to do it.
Yeah.
Because we have to protect ourselves legally and from a data perspective. So, putting your putting your contractual legal documents into Chat GPT to summarize it may not be the best thing in the world. But then it's like, well, what else can you offer me? So at the same time, you need to have a solution. If you're going to stop something, you need to give something.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and I guess that draws straight back into talent retention as well, doesn't it? At the end of the day, because people
totally. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, it's very hard to, if you think about developers or technologists or data science or AI, machine modeling, come on, work for the AA. Why? So you need to like be able to explain that we are doing innovation and we are technically pushing the boundary. You may not see or hear about it, but we're not saying we don't want to do it. So to promote that through the culture is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it is for a technologist. It's, if you like technology, as I've done, it's always about pushing the envelope. It's always about understanding how technology can help, with the business.
Yeah,
because we're all here at the end of the day to, I suppose, in some respects, turn up for work, do a good job, but certainly if you're in technology, you need a passion for what you do, and you want to be kind of playing with the latest toys. So being told you can't, sometimes it's like, well, I'll go somewhere else then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I've never really heard it described like that before, but I can definitely see that, like, sort of how you want to unearth that innovation and then voice it to the board. I can imagine is a particularly skillful endeavour and a real challenge. But whilst we're on the subject of challenges, what have been some of the biggest challenges you've had so far in the role of a CTO, and how have you actually gone about addressing those?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is really about understanding the finances of the organization. So if you're a technologist, you're interested in technology, but you really need to understand, if you can understand the money, that makes you more powerful, right? Because otherwise then you have, technology with the context of how much it's going to cost, what it's going to return, how much you spend already. So I would say, one of the things that I'm still doing it now and I'm still learning is really starting to understand more about the cost to operate technology. So from, all the contracts, all the software licenses, all the technology that's been purchased, how many times we bought it, trying to understand that. It's like an audit of all that software. I think it's important in every organization I've worked in, because I think you become more powerful and more valuable as a conversation, especially with senior people, if you can relate it back to the finances, right? Because otherwise it's just toys for boys, toys for girls, doesn't really matter. What I'm saying is it's just technology then. But, if you can understand the technology and the cost and how it fits into the organization and how you can maybe remediate or remove a legacy technology by introducing new technology and what it does to the expense and what it does to the growth, those conversations become more powerful.
Yeah.
Right. Then it's not just about I'm buying a whole bunch of technology. It's because it has a purpose. It also reduces the expense, or it gives us capabilities to drive more growth, different business lines, different products. You know what I mean? So I think having those conversations and getting involved is one of the challenges, I would say for CTO/CIOs. And why I say that is that CTOs have a different job description depending on the company and its stage or where it is as an organization.
Yeah.
If you're a CTO for a startup, you're probably coding, hands-on.
Very much so.
Okay. And it's probably a very small team and you're doing everything. If you join a CTO, a large organization, you may never see technology and you're just looking after, the service desk and you're looking after, you know what I mean? You kind of, you're
a spectrum, isn't it?
It's a different role. It really swings and roundabouts as to the stage of the company and its maturity. So in my perspective with the AA, it's a very strong team, very strong leadership team. From my perspective, it's more about technology and the strategy and understanding the investment, where to spend, where we don't need to spend, where do we have gaps in our capabilities, what's holding the business back from deploying new products? Is there a way to make it more efficient to deploy products? Is there a way to reduce the cost to deploy products? Those conversations are more powerful.
Yes.
Because technology's got to the point now where it's got so good, and with the the advent of SaaS providers and cloud providers, a lot of businesses don't even see technology as technology. So them, it's a service. right? The reason why they're buying it themselves, because, I have a credit card, I will go and buy some services. It happens to be software, but they don't see it like that.
No.
Because of the advent of the cloud has made that really quite seamless now.
Absolutely.
Right? You don't have to go and buy software and then procure some servers and then get some people to install the CD and then install this. That's all gone.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You go to the web, you find out what the business problem is. There's probably a SaaS provider.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So the world of technology is moving to the point where you're almost becoming almost like a team of integrators, because the technologies are almost being built now in the cloud, and all you're doing is sewing it all together.
Yeah.
And making sure the data transfers from A to B to C to D in a very secure manner, hopefully.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And trying to make it very seamless in that journey. And that's a change. And then trying to understand why you need to build versus buy is a conversation you have on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you're a technology company from the start, you may be building because that's actually your USP. That's what you've done. That's your product.
Yeah.
If you're a company that does roadside services and breakdown and insurance, I would say it's pretty commoditized. It's almost like challenge the need. What's the secret sauce and all of that? It's probably not the software. It's probably how you deploy your service, right?
Yeah.
And how quickly you serve a customer.
Yeah.
They don't really care about whether you built that technology or not.
No, absolutely. So from a cost and efficiency point of view, sometimes, and then speed as well, it probably makes sense to go third party or,
Right. And then you have to be kind of comfortable with the fact that you're giving away, I suppose, control to those cloud vendors.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would say, 3 or 4 years ago, I had a conversation with a CIO who I worked for. He kept saying, cloud it's not happening. And then I remember saying to him, well, this is about 2018, 2019. I was saying, okay, yeah, I get it. We'll build private cloud because that's the way to go. And now we're in 2024. You're going to be managed to the cloud. If it hasn't happened, it's happening.
Yeah.
Right. Every time you come and do an upgrade of a particular piece of software, you won't get an on-prem version.
Right.
It'll be simple as it's going to be in the cloud. And your next version is going to move. But that also changes your funding model, which is interesting. So people talk about, you can buy some servers, you can stick them in a data center, and you can, depreciate that over 5 years and maybe sweat it for another 2 years. But now that's an operating expense. That actually changes the model. A lot of companies aren't really set up for it, because actually that also changes the finances a lot.
Yeah.
And it's an interest, and we're in a kind of swing world now where we're swinging from on-prem to cloud. And interestingly enough, there are now loads of conversations happening within the technology world about, is everything fit for the cloud? And now you start hearing about cloud repatriation, right?
I have a couple of instances of that, actually.
Coming back from the cloud. So I think it's an interesting area around, the challenges of, the CTO is that I think it's the most amount of technology change I've seen in my whole career.
Yeah.
Because the cloud has changed everything. The vendors, the speed, the products that are out there. If you're a new company today, you don't really need many technology people. If you were just starting up, you think about, a lot of the entrepreneurs, they start in the cloud.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Their legacy is zero.
Yeah.
Right. They're evergreen. Right. So it's changed roles a lot.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess in the role of, CTO embracing change, cloud obviously is one that's had a fundamental shift in the technology landscape. And I think you mentioned earlier on one of the projects you've embarked upon recently in the AA is doing some innovation work around Gen AI. I suppose that's the other big hot potato at the moment of what's really shifting the dial forward. So I guess what is it you're most excited about as a CTO? What sort of technology trends do you kind of find really exciting now?
Well, I think the AI one, obviously, I think we're all going to look back at 2023 and say, where were we when that came out? It will be a landmark period of time, because it has changed, and it will change the way we work. It's going to become just part of the standard, day job. If you're writing job descriptions or summarizing content. It's just going to become the way of doing it. So I think trying to understand how to use it is going to be interesting, and looking at the use cases from personal productivity use cases, which is we're using it now, to actually then using it for external consumer facing journeys, I think will be the conversation about how far can you go without having a human in the loop.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm intrigued about, watching that space. Because there have already been a couple of incidents. I think it was on LinkedIn just the other day about DPD, I think, had an interesting
I didn't see that one.
So they had their chatbot was based on, I think, a generative, large language model. So it wasn't prescriptive. Like most of the chatbots are pretty prescriptive. They're like a knowledge base.
Yeah.
You ask it something, it says it can only respond with 5 phrases. Whereas now it was using generative text. So someone said, write me a poem about a very bad delivery company. And it wrote a very nice poem about DPD being crap and falling apart. And it was very interesting.
Brilliant.
And then they realized maybe they shouldn't have released it without a human in the loop.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, companies are learning, that, at what point can you let it loose? Talk about the Turing test, which is a classic one, which is, can you tell whether it's a human or not? I think we're going to get there. But I think at the moment there's a little bit of caution about how far you let it go without having some type of control over it, especially for consumers. Internally, it doesn't really matter if that makes a mistake.
True.
Okay?
Yeah.
It'll end up on the front page of LinkedIn if it does make a mistake, as it has.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's a case of, okay, that wasn't a great use case.
Yes.
But I think that's going to be interesting. I think over the next 12 to 18 months. But like I said, the change, the velocity of change within this area, it's great because it's going to create a whole new bunch of jobs, roles, descriptions are going to change. The way you work's going to change. It's going to be a whole new bunch of learnings for people, training courses. It's going to be interesting to see how far it goes and how quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not going backwards, is it? Put it that way. It's
no, the cat's out of the bag and it's moving forward. Now it's just a case of how do you harness the energy?
Yeah.
Right. And then you will go through this, trough of disillusionment, as they call it, where you suddenly realize, it's either it's just too difficult, it's too hard, it's too powerful. It's almost like, what can't you do with it? You know what I mean? You're almost like you can end up in this spiral of overthinking everything.
Yeah.
Right, which is why you kind of need people out there in their day jobs thinking about how they can use it, because it's too difficult to just say it can only happen in one area. Right, it's going to be happening. People will use it a lot differently than you think you would use it. It's like most things. You give somebody a tool and you think, okay, it's a hammer they're using in a certain way, and next one they're using it to prop a door open. You're like, the hammer wasn't meant for that.
Yeah.
Same with AI. I think what we think it can do and what people will use it for will be quite interesting over the next year or so.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's. I totally agree with you about the watershed moment, and it's the first time I've felt, in certainly my 15 years of doing this job, technology's come along and been a global phenomenon. It's been an event that's happened literally globally, where my mum will know what ChatGPT is and will have used it and played around with it. And I think that's the first time that's kind of.
It can get weary though. I think you're going to get to the point of being almost AI weary, consumed. You know what I mean? It's almost like almost tired of thinking about where every time you do something, like, oh, should I be using it to do that?
Yeah.
I was in the US for my nephew's wedding just back in September, and again overthinking it. My brother-in-law was writing a best man speech. I said, hey, why don't we put it through ChatGPT and do it in the voice of Clint Eastwood? He loved it. So we did it in voice of Clint Eastwood, Kevin Costner, Robert De Niro. And in the end, he went, I'll just stick to my one.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a point where people are going to get very weary about talking about it until it just becomes just part of the fabric.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I especially feel that way in like the generative AI when it comes to the art side of things. I feel that people will just go sort of 360 back to where we've come from, because as great as it is, you can just literally type it in and create a piece of art. I think, to your point earlier, that technology ultimately is there to serve a purpose for people, right? Technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's there to actually make a difference in a person's
Maybe
life.
it's like, I'm just, maybe to predict in the future, and we can't really tell. It could be like, the DVDs came along, CDs came along, now vinyl's back again.
Yeah.
Because people realize they quite enjoy the scratchy sound, right? And they quite enjoyed having something physical.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Kindle, right? I mean, I've got 3 Kindles at home I haven't turned off for 5 years because I enjoy a book.
Yeah.
So going back to the art thing, it's very interesting. I was at a presentation the other day, and the PowerPoint presentation, every other picture was a generated, really nice, clean image.
Yeah.
But it almost got a bit like too clean.
Yeah.
Too good. You know what I mean? Too perfect. So I can see, not yet, but I can see there's a certain point where, where's the art?
Yeah.
Right? What makes you different? It'll be almost like, well, this is not AI generated.
Exactly. Yeah. It'll become, I think, too sterile, and people will find beauty in the imperfections again,
Yeah, but I think it's going to take another cycle. Who knows when? Can't predict anything, to be honest. But yeah, it is tiring.
Yeah.
And I think being not even a CTO, I think if you enjoy technology, and I think the amount of technology and the amount of change and the amount of power that's available is huge. It's now just limited by the ideas.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's not an inhibitor anymore. So before it used to be, I've got a great idea, or technology not. Now it's actually, we're waiting. How good is your idea? Which now exposes different problems. Because now it's like, oh, actually that idea maybe wasn't a great idea, because now you can launch it so quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas previously it took time to launch an idea or go to market. Now you go to market really quickly. Right? So now you got to learn to adapt.
Yeah.
You've got to learn to get out there quick, fail quickly, succeed even quicker. The companies that can do that will be the ones that will survive, because the business models will change on a continual basis.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Like Netflix has adapted, it's changed, it's continuously evolving.
Yeah.
The AA is evolving. We're going digital. All our journeys are digital. We're doing online tracking of where the vehicle is going to be. You can report you have to incorporate that. That's kind of going to become just the baseline.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then it's understanding what's the differentiator.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Yeah. Well, Mike, look, I really, really enjoyed the chat today. I think it's been a fantastic episode, and thank you very much for coming on and speaking to us. And I like to end every podcast, as you may know if you've listened to it before, with the same question, which is, what is your one favourite piece of advice that you've ever received that you would like to share with your fellow humankind?
Yeah, I think it will be going back to the company I joined when I thought I knew all the answers. The guy I work for who employed me just said, it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
I like that. Yeah.
I think it is. I think everyone is, and it changes depending on the company you work for. So understanding the tempo of the organization, the culture of the organization, the same set of things that you think will work in one place may not work in another based on the way that organization works. So you need to understand how you get the change and how you affect change.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that's the bit you learn from just being, present and listening and being in sync, which kind of needs to be empathy, self-awareness, very important, because otherwise you can go in there thinking you've got all the answers and realize no one's following you.
Yeah.
Right. It becomes a very lonely place.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to bring people with you. So that goes back into not what you do, but how you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said right at the beginning of the podcast of you still got to work at it, you've still got to read and upskill yourself on self-awareness, because there's no end state, is there really? It's just a continual journey.
I think totally. I think, learning, reading, listening, podcasts, videos, all at your fingertips, I think if I don't think there's ever a finished product or a finished person. So going back to the point of being at 16 or 18, I didn't know what good looked like. I just knew that if it meant that on a Sunday I wasn't worried about the Monday, that wasn't a bad place to be. And I've met a lot of people who dread the Monday on the Sunday.
Yeah,
and
me
it's like,
for about 10 years.
Yeah, and then it's like, my wife did similar. And then it's like, change it.
Yeah.
And she did. And I have, right? So there's no harm in sometimes just, I think it's easier to stay and it's harder to make the change.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think it's quite important sometimes to look back and go, maybe I stayed a bit too long. Maybe I should have, and it's, I think sliding doors, I don't think there's any right or wrong, but I think sometimes just being uncomfortable and just not overthinking it isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
Intuition's not, sometimes quite powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, I'd like to say thank you again for coming on. Been a fantastic guest, and I wish you all the continued success. I'll keep you up to speed with all your latest progressions in the world of innovation and beyond in the world of the AA. And please do come on again and come and share your story again with us at some point.
Great. No, appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for your time.